Good morning for Friday's edition of Everything Yesterday This Morning. I'm going to try to go quickly because I have a lot to cover today. Annual inflation hit 7.9%, is the fastest rate since 1982. Rising prices for gasoline, housing, and food drove most of February's inflation spike and squeezed household budgets amid an otherwise strong recovery from the pandemic. A combination of labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, and the swiftness of the economic recovery has fueled rapid price increases for essential goods. Grocery prices rose 1.4% in February alone and are up 8.6% on the year, which is the fastest annual increase since April of 1981. Energy prices rose 3.5% last month and 6.6% monthly increase in gasoline prices. The Federal Reserve is on track to hike interest rates next week as inflation steams well above the bank's annual target. Jerome Powell expressed confidence that the bank would be able to raise and cool off inflation without denting a strong labor market. Rising prices are a growing political problem for Biden and Democrats ahead of the midterm elections. Voter approval with Biden's handling of the economy has fallen steadily. But every time you pay $1 more per gallon of gas, another Ukrainian gets their freedom back, so make sure that you sacrifice for the greater good. Pressure builds on Biden to repay Venezuela's goodwill. Interesting that Venezuela is entering the news. President Maduro freed 2 American prisoners and promised to resume negotiations with his opponents, and so some are pressuring the administration to begin unwinding sanctions against the government. While the Biden administration is saying very little that was discussed behind closed doors, Maduro came out and bragged that careful protocol was followed, with the flags of the two nations beautifully united as they should be. For the past 5 years, the United States has, with little success, tried everything from punishing oil sanctions to criminal indictments and support for clandestine coups in its campaign to remove Maduro and restore what it sees as Venezuela's stolen democracy. As I told you yesterday, Iran and Venezuela are seen as the most likely to benefit as Biden tries to mitigate the impact from a ban on Russian oil imports that will further aggravate the highest inflation in 40 years. While Venezuela is eager to have the sanctions eased, it appears they're not ready to immediately abandon ties to Russia. Shortly following the talks with the United States, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez met in Turkey with Sergei Lavrov, which is Russia's foreign minister. No details of their discussion were released. Representative Gregory Meeks, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, applauded Biden's efforts and said that he should next suspend oil sanctions to provide support for negotiations. Quote, "The Trump-era oil sanctions currently in place have only deepened the suffering of the Venezuelan people and failed to weaken Maduro's control of the country." Why do we think that sanctions in Russia aren't going to do the same thing to the Russian people and fail to weaken Putin's hold on the country? You would think that we might learn lessons, but we don't. According to some economists, the United States is headed toward a full-blown recession within 6 to 12 months. Facebook and Instagram temporarily are allowing calls for violence against Putin and Russia among some European users. Users of the two Meta platforms in some countries can now fuel violent rhetoric against Russians in the context of the Ukraine invasion, according to internal emails obtained by the Newswire service. The emails specify that calls for violence against Russian soldiers are permitted since they are, quote, used as a proxy for the Russian military. In emails to content moderators, Reuters alleged the company is also temporarily allowing some posts that call for death to Putin or the Belarusian president Alexander Lukashenko in Russia, Ukraine, and Poland. As long as they do not have calls for other targets or have two indicators of credibility, such as the location or the method by which they are going to kill these individuals, the posts must also be talking about the invasion of Ukraine. This policy applies to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Russia, and Ukraine. Facebook's violence and incitement policy states, while we understand that people commonly express disdain or disagreement by threatening someone or calling for violence in non-serious ways, we remove language that incites or facilitates serious violence. We remove content, disable accounts, and work with law enforcement when we believe there is a genuine risk of physical harm or direct threats to public safety. We also tried to consider the language and context in order to distinguish casual statements from content that constitutes a credible threat to public or personal safety. Rules for thee, but not for whomever we decide to abandon them for. United States colleges cut partnerships and financial ties with Russia. Colleges across the country are pulling students from study abroad programs in Russia, ending research partnerships, and cutting financial ties as a part of a global wave of condemnation over the invasion of Ukraine. The moves are mostly symbolic, as is darn near everything in politics. U.S. colleges have no leverage to sway Russia or squeeze its finances, but the suggestion that some or all Russian students should forfeit the opportunity to study here has drawn new attention to the role of universities in global disputes. A senior advisor for the President's Alliance on Higher Education said, "Okay, now do China." Grimes, a little bit of gossip for you guys today. Grimes and Elon Musk welcomed a second baby together into the world. Grimes sat down with Vanity Fair, and after hearing baby cries, she finally addressed the fact that she was hiding a baby, that she has a new baby, and she said she's a little colicky too. She and Musk welcomed their son, XAEA12, in March of 2020. Grimes calls her son X. The new baby was born by a surrogate and is called Y. Her full name is Exa Dark Sidereal Musk. Exa refers to the supercomputing term exaflops. Dark symbolizes the unknown, and sidereal is the true time of the universe, star time, deep space time, not our relative Earth time. Musk has 5 other sons, a set of twins, and a set of triplets conceived via in vitro fertilization with his first wife, Justine. While it was reported in September of 2021 that Grimes and Musk broke up, she said, "That's not entirely true. There's no real word for it. I would probably refer to him as my boyfriend, but we're very fluid. We live in separate houses. We're best friends. We see each other all the time." That's your gossip. I follow Elon Musk gossip because I'm a stan for him, for certain reasons. Anyway, climate czar John Kerry said that wealthy nations will next year be able to live up to their promise of providing $100 billion annually to help developing countries deal with climate change. We're just a little bit shy of it for 2022. It's absolutely clear that we will have it for 2023. I still think we can get it for 2022. The agreement came out of last year's COP26 climate summit in Glasgow. Meanwhile, called for developed countries to at least double their collective climate finance payments from 2019 levels by 2025. And while many developed nations have contributed to help developing countries, some developing countries have called for further actions, including a fund that would give reparations for the climate-related loss and damages that they have suffered. I'm super sorry, but at this point, this is starting to feel like the largest grift ever of all time. $100 billion a year to help developing countries with climate change? Who's getting those contracts? Who's getting that money? What developing countries are we shelling out this $100 billion to? Who's controlling that? It's just. Study shows how gene editing can bring extinct rats back to life. A team of paleogeneticists have studied how, using gene editing, they could resurrect the humble Christmas Island rat, which died out 120 years ago. It's thought that when the settlers came over into the country, that the black rats that were on the ships killed off all of the Christmas Island rats. Though they did not follow through and create a living specimen, they say their paper, which is published in Current Biology on Wednesday, demonstrates how close scientists working on de extinction projects could actually get using the current technology. There are three pathways to bringing back extinct animals: backbreeding, related to, like, where they go with related species to achieve lost traits; cloning, which was used to create Dolly the sheep in 1996; and finally, genetic editing, which Gilbert and colleagues looked at. The idea is to take surviving DNA of an extinct species and compare it to the genome of a closely related modern species, then using CRISPR to edit the modern species genome in the places where it differs. The edited cells then be used to create an embryo implanted in a surrogate host. The team used brown rats, commonly used in lab experiments, as the modern reference species and found that they could reconstruct 95% of the Christmas Island rat genome. The 5% they couldn't recover was from genome regions that controlled smell and immunity, meaning that the recovered rat might look the same but would lack key functionality. Tom Gilbert, who is an evolutionary geneticist working on the project, said, "The take home is, even if we have basically the perfect ancient DNA situation, we've got a really good sample, we've sequenced the hell out of it, we're still lacking 5% of it." This has important implications for de extinction efforts, such as the project by US bioscience firm Colossal. They're trying to resurrect the woolly mammoth. Mammoths have roughly the same evolutionary distance from modern elephants as brown rats and Christmas Island rats do. Gilbert admits that he has mixed feelings on de extinction projects. He said, "I'm not convinced that it's the best use of anyone's money. If you had to choose between bringing back something or protecting what was left, I'd put my money into protection." Man who received first modified pig heart transplant dies. David Bennett Sr. was a 57-year-old patient who had a terminal heart disease and became the first person to receive a genetically modified pig heart. He passed away Tuesday, according to a statement from the University of Maryland Medical Center in Baltimore. He lived for 2 months with the pig heart, and although not giving the exact cause of his death, the medical center said his condition began getting worse several days before his death. When it became clear he would not recover, he was given palliative care and was able to communicate with his family during his final hours. Before receiving the genetically modified pig heart, Bennett needed mechanical support to stay alive, but was rejected for a standard heart transplant. After the surgery, the heart performed well for several weeks without any sign of rejection. Bennett was able to spend time with his family and do physical therapy. This organ transplant demonstrated for the first time that a genetically modified animal heart can function like a human heart without immediate rejection by the body. So I put these two stories in here because as we're talking a lot more about science and toying with viruses and pig hearts and de-extinction and all of this kind of stuff, I think that it's important to keep some perspective from a morality. Like, what at what point do we stop messing with science? At what point do we um, start taking into consideration the decisions that we're making from a scientific perspective? That's just my 2 cents on the way out on Friday's edition of Everything Yesterday This Morning. I'm traveling this weekend. My daughter has her state gymnastics competition, so it's a very exciting weekend for us. I will see you guys on Monday. Thank you so much and have a great weekend.